Hi and welcome to Programming Percy. Today we'll be talking about how you can self-host your applications in a secure way using Cloudflare tunnels. So whenever I want to deploy an application right now, I tend to use some kind of cloud provider. Now it's quite painless, but let's be honest, whenever I have this like funky play application that I just want to run for fun, maybe share it with a few friends, or if I want to run my own cloud or anything like that, setting it up on the cloud, it can be quite tedious, and sometimes it feels kind of overkill. And if we want to add stuff like a database and stuff, it's going to cost. Sometimes I feel like it's so simple to run an application from home on my computer. It costs nothing but electricity, and I kinda for a long time have been thinking, should I buy a home server so I can do this? I have many small applications that I think, oh gosh, I want to deploy this, but it ends up with me not doing it because it's too much work. I need to set up the cloud. I need to secure the cloud accesses. I have to fix the infrastructure to create a database, and I need to configure those services, etc., etc. But what if we could skip the cloud? What if I could just run a Docker on my computer, running my software, and I could host it from home on my, say, Raspberry? Well, we have always been able to do that, but there's a few buts. It would either require you to open up a port to your network, to your home network. This will expose you to attacks. Just opening a port won't make you suffer an attack, but it will open up an attack vector for any bad guys. And we also probably need to fix a VPN to host through. And if you're not allowed to have a static IP, for instance, by your ISP, you would need to also rent a VPS service so you could have a static IP to host on. It's always scary, and there's a lot of places where you can mess up. But Cloudflare Tunnels allows us to do this in a matter of minutes, and it's for free, so that's even better. Now, I wouldn't be able to make this video with a good consciousness if I didn't mention that there is a but. It is free, it is super simple to set up, but they will perform a man in the middle. This is the way they make it work. Cloudflare Tunnels is major. It's used by a lot of people. I don't see an issue, but I know some people are really scared about these kind of things, so you should know about it. Now, using Cloudflare Tunnels, I can just easily in a minute run a Docker, expose it to the internet, and have my own application up and running in a minute. And it's amazing. So how does it work? Now, it works by you on your server running something on your local host and having an application there running. And then we install their service, which is called Cloudflared. And it's a software, and it will open up 4 connections using Quick to communicate. And these connections are only outbound. This setup allows us to expose a application or SSH or anything else without exposing your internet. So that's why we say that this is a secure hosting solution, because you're not opening up your network. I have to mention, the application that you host can still be insecure. So this just removes one attack vector. You still need to secure the application that you are hosting. The difference between Cloudflare Tunnels and using a other solution out there is that Cloudflare Tunnels is really easy to set up. It's super beginner friendly. Basically, you can almost not do anything wrong. To follow this tutorial, you will need 2 things. You will need a computer, and this computer is used to host an API and also to install Cloudflare. I don't want to install Cloudflare on my main computer, so I will be using a Raspberry Pi, which I will be hosting an API on. You will also need a domain name. The domain is used to reach the service that you expose. You can do this without a domain. Cloudflare comes with a testing API which you can use to host, but it will give you a random domain name and stuff. But you can only use that for testing how the service works. So if you want to just try it out without connecting a domain to it, you can do that. But I do recommend you to get a domain. You can get a domain on Namecheap, and they currently have a offer. So $698, and you can get your .com name for a very cheap price. I will put a link in the description to Namecheap. Note that this is an affiliate link, so purchases will sponsor me. What's great about Cloudflare Tunnels is that you can use subdomains, so you only need one domain to host a lot of different applications. If you don't care about the domain name, you can just connect them to subdomains, and you can basically have how many you want. In this tutorial, I will be using a Raspberry Pi Zero, which is this very weak Raspberry Pi that I have to play around with. I do recommend you to get on Raspberry Pi. With a Raspberry Pi 4, you can host pretty much. They are really strong. For the price that they come with, they are really capable. So I will put a link in the description for Raspberry Pis as well if you want to buy one. So one other thing that we will need on the computer that you're hosting is Golang. You don't need it. The only thing we will use Go for is that we will build a super simple web server that exposes a API that we can reach out to. And this is just to test Cloudflare Tunnels out and see that it's actually working as expected. It's like 10 lines of code that we will write. So if you want to expose something else, go ahead and use that instead. If you want to follow along and expose the same Go application, you can find the download instructions on their websites. It's pretty easy to install. Note that if you're using a Raspberry Pi, you can find the download link for all the architectures. If you go here to the other downloads, it will bring you to a list where you can find different architectures. So me, Raspberry Pi Zero, I have to use the ARM v6L, for instance. Once you have a domain, you have a Raspberry or a computer to use, and you have Go installed, if you installed it. You will need a Cloudflare account for this, so I will put a link in the description where you can go and sign up for an account. It's pretty straightforward. You enter your email and stuff. So go ahead and create an account for Cloudflare because you will need one to use this service. So before we begin creating our tunnel, we will need to add the domain that you have to Cloudflare. And in the Cloudflare dashboard, which looks like this, you can go into domain registration. If you go inside here, you can manage your domains. So I already have a domain, but you can add more domains. You can also buy domains with registered domains. You enter the domain here, you search for it. And so for instance, if I want to search for test, it will search, and you can see that they are also selling domains. If you buy a domain from Cloudflare, it will automatically fix the DNS settings for you. I usually use namespace to buy my domains. It's a habit, but you can also buy the domains from here. So what you want to do is to add your site to Cloudflare. Actually visiting their documentation, I will put a link in the description. They have these really nice instructions on what you will need to do at your domain, because you need to expose your domain to Cloudflare. So you will need to go into your registrar and make sure to apply the settings that they say so that Cloudflare can reach your domain and manage it. You can, for instance, set the name servers to the name servers that they want. So go into the documentation and follow the steps that they have here. It will be different depending on what registrar you are using. So I can't really show you how you do that, but they have a pretty good example here where they show you how to do it. Basically, you change the name server settings and update those at the domain provider that you have chosen. Once you have added the name server for Cloudflare to your registrar so they can reach your domain, it is time to start actually building our tunnels, which is great. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a so-called website. So go into the websites tab, and at this location you can add a website. So let's go ahead and do that. The website I have is percybalmer.work, which is a domain that I own, and you press add. You will see a lot of pricing here. Don't worry, you can scroll down and there's a free tier, which is really great. So let's select the free tier and continue. So after you've selected free tier, you will see that they are reviewing the DNS records for your website. So if you set up your DNS records correctly, you will be brought to this page. If you have any errors, this page will tell you what you have to fix and make sure that the DNS settings are up to date and what they need to be. So once you click here, we will be adding our website to the Cloudflare. So now the DNS records are correct. They will also need to make sure that the name server is pointing toward the Cloudflare. So let's go ahead and check that. And if your name servers are configured correctly, you will be brought here. At this point, you can improve security, optimize performance, and get the more out of it. So if you go here, you can see, make sure that HTTPS is correct. We always want to use HTTPS. Make sure that you select HTTPS always, unless you don't want to, but shouldn't be an issue. Now you can minify CSS automatically, JavaScript, and stuff like that. I'm just gonna go ahead and click that and save it. I'm gonna save this and finish. You can change this to have the settings that you need. Once you are brought to this screen, your domain is successfully added and we have a web application created in Cloudflare. So we have our web application created. This is needed to manage the DNS records, and that's all we do here. So once that's done, it's actually time to start using the tunnels. So to start using the tunnels, it's actually pretty easy. We're going to go one step back because we don't want to mess around here. You can do a lot of changes here depending on the application you're hosting, but we're not here for that. So let's go one step back. And you can see something called Zero Trust here. You can see your website also appearing here correctly. That's good. But let's go to Zero Trust. Zero Trust is the Cloudflare platform for applying a Zero Trust management to the applications. And it looks like this. Now I already have mine configured since before, so it actually won't ask me. But if this is the first time you're doing this, it will ask you for a team name. The team name is what your account name will be used. And it's called team because you can apply many users to have access to the same Zero Trust. So you can have a team working on this together. One thing to note is that a team name will get a URL. So for instance, my team name is Programming Percy. So if I go open up a new tab in the browser, and I can go to programmingpercy.cloudflareaccess.com. Now, each team name will get this little app launcher where you can find all your applications later. So remember to pick an appropriate team name if you're going to use it with other people. So after you enter the team name, you will be brought to a screen looking kind of like this. I already have a plan, so mine looks a little bit different, but make sure you select the free tier, which allows for 50 users and a lot of stuff, more than enough for this. So continue with free, select the plan you want, and select proceed. Now don't worry, proceed won't actually ask you for any billing information since the plan you select is free. So go ahead and make that purchase, and once that's done, you'll be brought back to the dashboard. Inside the dashboard, we can see a few things. We can see analytics, which will show you information about your tunnels and amount of users and stuff like that. We will look at that later. What we are interested in is the access. In the access, we can create accesses to our domain. And we are going to create a tunnel. So go ahead and click on tunnel. And it's going to look like this. Create your first tunnel. We are going to do that. So select a name for your tunnel. Now, as they say here, you should select a name that is not, don't name it like API1 or something like that. The name for the tunnel should be wider. So maybe the network that are connected. So I'm on my guest network right now. So maybe I should call it guest tunnel or guest applications. So select a wide name. I'm just going to call mine application tunnels. I'm going to go ahead, click on save. Now this step is the installation step. It will ask you to store your tunnel. Now, as you see here, you see a code down here. This code is secret. Do not share this code with anyone. If you do so, they will be able to connect to your tunnel. So it will tell you how to install. Go ahead, select your operating system that you're using. You should find most of it here. You can even use Docker if you want to. Select your architecture. Now, if your architecture is not listed in this tab, you can go ahead and clone the GitHub repository for Cloudflare because it is open source. Cloudflare is the service that will be running on your system, performing this man in the middle that makes this possible. So they decided to have it open source because nobody's going to install anything on your computer unless they know what it is. So it's really nice. Now, either follow these instructions. For me, since I'm using a Raspberry Pi, I cannot use these instructions. I have to build the application from scratch. So I'm just going to go ahead, clone the repository, and I will be sharing these commands inside the description if you need to build it from source code. So you can just go ahead and do the same thing. Once it's cloned, let's go ahead and go inside the folder and do make Cloudflare. And it will run make and install everything that you need. The make can run for quite a while. So just let it run, and whenever it's done, let's go ahead and let's also install the command line tool from Golang. And one final thing that you need to do is you need to move the binary that was created, and it will be inside Cloudflare folder /Cloudflared, and it's the binary that was built with the makefile, and you need to put it in your local bin so it is accessible. So once we have installed it correctly, we need to go inside the website again, copy the command if you have Cloudflare installed. So copy the command with your secrets. So copy the command, go inside a terminal and execute it, and it will install Cloudflare on your machine. Now it will also install and connect to the tunnel. So this secret is connected to my tunnel. And as you see, it's successfully installed. Now, if you go back to the UI and scroll down, you will see connectors, and you can see my computer is actually connected now. So we have a connection between my Raspberry and this tunnel. It's that easy. So the connection is working. Let's go to next, and it will tell us to add it a public host name. So here you can add subdomains, and you can add as many as you want. You can add the domain. I only have one domain, so I'm going to select that one. You can also add paths. So if I host anything on my machine, I can direct them through here. So in my case, I will be hosting a HTTP API. So I'm going to select the type HTTP. You can see here there's HTTPS, TCP, you can have SSH, RDP, Samba, and a lot of other stuff. But for simplicity, I'm going to use a localhost. I'm going to expose my localhost 8080. So what we're doing here is that we're saying whatever my Raspberry Pi is serving on localhost 8080 will be available on this URL. So you can go ahead and add whatever you want, test, and then it will be available on test.PercyBalmerWork and whatever path we set. The subdomain and the path is optional, and you can use this to control where your applications should appear. So I'm going to go ahead and add a test API subdomain. You can find additional settings. So that's warning. Okay, so the DNS probably hasn't just updated yet. but no worries. You can go ahead and find additional settings here. You can control the HTTP header, and you can set connection timeouts and keep alives, and you can really have a bunch of stuff that you can change here depending on what you want to do. I'm just going to leave everything at the default for now. Now I'm going to save this. It's going to work a little bit. It will pop up here. So I'm inside my tunnel. I have my application tunnels and it's connected, and you can see here that we have a route, and you can go inside configure to see all the routes as well. So you can see I have this route up and running. So test API goes to localhost 8080 on my Raspberry Pi. So if I visit this URL now, I will see this bad gateway. And that is expected because I'm not running anything on my device right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to my device. I'm going to clear my screen. I'm going to go to my home folder. I'm going to make their demo, and I'm going to go inside demo. So I'm just going to create this super simple Go program. So I don't have NeoVim installed on this computer, so I'm just going to go ahead and use Nano because I'm not really fond of the regular VI. So I'm just going to go ahead, create a simple main package, and I'm going to do a few imports. I'm going to use the net HTTP. I'm going to make a log. I'm going to create a simple endpoint function which will take a HTTP request and just print a simple string. That's the application that we will be hosting for now. So I'm gonna have a super simple API here. You can host whatever you want. This is just to showcase how easy we can add stuff to the tunnel. So welcome to your API hosted locally, because this will be running locally on my Raspberry Pi, hosted on localhost and not exposed to the internet. Hosting on 8080, a simple log message whenever we start the program. I'm gonna add a HandleFunc on the root path and assign my endpoint. I'm going to start the web server, ListenAndServe, on port 8080, and like that. That's it. So I'm going to save this file. I will put the code in the description if you just want to copy it and go ahead and follow along. So once I have that, I'm going to run it. So I'm going to go ahead and do go run main.go, and it's going to load for a few seconds. So it's hosted on 8080. Now I'm going to navigate back to the browser. I'm going to refresh the URL, and as you can see, welcome to your API hosted locally. So we have a service running on my Raspberry Pi on localhost 8080, and Cloudflare Tunnel is exposing that to this domain. And I mean, you have to agree that it was really simple to set up. You define where the service is, you tell which domain and subdomain to host it on, and that's it. So whenever I want to add stuff, I can just add these. If I have more services, I can just go ahead, add a new subdomain to that domain, maybe on localhost 8081, for instance, if I have another service running there. It's that simple, really. There's nothing more to it. So we have a tunnel up and running which routes our traffic. Using the UI is really nice and simple, as you have seen, but sometimes you want to use a command line because you get more control when using the command line. So I kind of like running the command line. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to connect to the account, and we're going to do that using Cloudflare Tunnel login. Cloudflare Tunnel login, and it will open up a browser. If you're using a headless UI, you can see this link, which is printed. If it doesn't open up, just copy that link and go inside your browser and open that link. Doing so will bring you to the dashboard. Now it will ask you to authenticate your tunnel. So just click the tunnel that you want to authenticate and authorize it. And it says successfully, and it has installed a certificate. So what it did was it went to your server using the Cloudflare service command that is running, and it actually installed a certificate on your server. So whenever you use the Cloudflare CLI, it will be authenticated right now using that certificate. We can easily use the command line to do stuff. So Cloudflare tunnel lists will actually show you all the tunnels that you have available. You can see the ID of the tunnel, the name of the tunnel. And the ID here is really important because we will be using that to configure tunnels. So I will begin creating a new tunnel actually, because this tunnel I want to manage by CLI. So I'm going to call it CLI tunnel. So Cloudflare tunnel, and it's going to be tunnel create and then followed by the name. So tunnel create CLI tunnel. This will go and create a new tunnel for us. So you see the tunnel credentials files written to, and you see a credential file that is written. And you can also see that everything worked out. This is great. This file is important because we can use it inside the tunnel configuration later. So just remember that the file is created for us and it's a JSON file with the credentials to this tunnel. Keep that file safe. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new file. And I'm going to call this file testapi.yaml. I'm going to open it up. You use these YAML files to configure the same things that we did in the UI. Basically, you say URL on the device, so localhost 8083, for instance, and the ID of the tunnel and the configuration file or credentials file. We can go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go ahead, create a new service, and the service will be on 8083, and I will go ahead and create a tunnel and the credentials file. Now I'm going to save that. I'm going to copy the credentials file that the command gave us, because that is related to this tunnel. Insert that there. And we also need the tunnel ID. So I'm going to copy the ID from here, and I'm going to place that in the tunnel. This will actually create the same thing that we did in the UI. Let's go ahead and save that file. And we need to also create the domain routing. So we need to do, because in this file, we only said that the service is on 8083 and which tunnel to host it on. We never said on which domain to host it. So we need to do that. We can do that with the Cloudflare command. So we do Cloudflare tunnel route DNS. We say the name of the tunnel, so CLI tunnel, and I can say I want to route percybalmer.work, for instance. This is the route. Oh, okay. So I already have something on that domain. So maybe I'm going to do cli.percybalmer. And it has added the CNAME for that route. And it connected it to the tunnel. We need to start the tunnel, because when you create the tunnel in the CLI, it won't automatically start. You need to start it. So what we can do is, I'm going to do pvd to see where I am. And we can do Cloudflare tunnel. We can pass in a configuration file. And it's the configuration file that we just created. Home demo and testapi.yaml, and then run. The run command will start the tunnel. So you will see a bunch of logs, and you will see 4 connections being created, remember? So you see here connection, blah, 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 connection, connection, connection. So we have 4 connections up and running for redundancy. Redundancy is great. I'm gonna open up a new terminal and I'm gonna log in to the Raspberry because the other terminal is running the program right now. I'm gonna go in demo. I'm gonna modify my Golang program. And instead of 8080, I'm going to run it on 8083 because that's the port that I set in the configuration file. I'm gonna go ahead and run the program. The program is hosted on 8083. So if I go ahead and go into the terminal now, and I'm gonna go search for the website cli.percybalmer.work. It's working. So the tunnel hosted through my CLI is actually working as expected. If you go back to the Zero Trust platform and refresh, and you go inside the tunnels, we should see the CLI tunnel up and running. Yes, the CLI tunnel up and running. You're gonna see a warning here saying that it's locally managed because you can't manage it using both the UI or the CLI. If you create your tunnel through the command line, you will need to manage it through the command line. But so why would you want to do that? It seems like a lot more work, but it also gives you a lot of flexibility. One thing that is really cool is that we can add Ingress Rules. So I'm just going to go ahead and close the tunnel. The tunnel is stopped. I'm going to add Ingress Rules, and Ingress Rules is used for routing basically. So we can go ahead and do an ls. I'm going to do nano test API YAML, open it up. I'm going to remove the URL because we no longer need that. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to add the ingress field, which allows us to add ingress rules. Now I'm going to go ahead and say cli.percybalmer.work, which is the domain name, and I'm going to point it towards the correct service, localhost 8083. And we can add multiple stuff here. So if you have many services that you want to manage and control, you can easily update this file and have it running correctly. So I can also say percybalmer.work/test, for instance, and I can point that towards a service. Now I only have one service, so I'm just going to redirect it to the same simple service, but I think you get the idea. Now one important thing is that in the end of the ingress, you need to have a catch-all rule. A catch-all rule will catch all other URLs that doesn't match any of the ones we have configured. If we have somebody go to percybalmer.work.test2, we need to catch that and give them a 404. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. We can do that using this small little helper function called http status 404. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. Again, simply restart the tunnel and then go ahead, restart the tunnel. And once that's running, I'm going to go ahead, revisit the browser, make sure that my CLI, Percybalmer, still working. So that's how easy you can use the CLI. You can configure a lot of stuff using the CLI, such as origin and a bunch of other stuff, and you can find all those settings inside the documentation, which I will also put in the description. One other thing, you can make the tunnel start up as a service on your computer, and it's really easy. I won't cover that in this tutorial. It's like one command, and you can find that in the documentation. I'll put it in the description as well. Tunnels are really easy to set up and really easy to use, and they allow you to create different routes and endpoints easily. And one other great thing is that they come with built-in analytics. So if you go into analytics and access, and let's let it load, and you can see here I have failed logins. I won't cover that in this tutorial, but we can add logins and stuff. We can see how many connected users we have, how many have accesses, and we can see a little graph. We can see the APIs and which endpoints people are using. So that's also a nice little feature. So tunnels are really easy to set up, really easy to use. They allow you to create different routes and endpoints really easily, both through the UI or the CLI. Now, they're great because they don't expose your network directly, and you don't need a VPS, VPN, or open up any ports to your network. Is this all good and you can go full loco now and just publish everything? Well, it is secure, yes, but that doesn't mean you can skip any other security measurements now. Now, you might still want to encrypt your traffic. I don't know if you noticed, but since we're forcing HTTPS, they're creating our certificate for us, and it's great and stuff, but we don't own it really. And they also encrypt your traffic locally, internally on the Cloudflare network, but this means they can unencrypt it if they want to. So encrypt your stuff with your own stuff also. This reduces the accessibility for Cloudflare. And I mean, the applications that you expose, they can still be vulnerable, so it's not like you're safe. You still need to take security measurements inside the applications that you host, but it reduces the attack vector for the users. What now? So I really do recommend you to go ahead and buy a Raspberry Pi. They're amazing, and start playing around with it as your home server. It's a really super powerful single board computer, and you can use it with Cloudflare tunnels really easily. The next step would be protecting your APIs or services that you expose. So as you see, anybody can visit this link. I'm gonna shut it down later, but anyone can go here, anyone can use it. That's maybe not what you want, but Cloudflare Tunnels also makes it super easy to add a SSO login screen, which can protect your exposed services with a login for GitHub or Google or whatever you want to have your users authenticate with. This was actually all for this tutorial. You have learned how to use and set up Cloudflare Tunnels. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you watch my other tutorial about SSO logins. And that's it. Thank you very much, and bye.